Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of College Basketball Weekly here on the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee. Everything School HQ, as much as the NCAA would like for it not to be Everything School HQ. My good friend Will Warren up there in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, is right there with me as we fight the good fight, as the powers that be go against our beloved university, where we are both alumni, and will fight the good fight to stop the powers that be from going after and vilifying what is Everything School HQ. Will, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I've got a two-step plan here. So number one, I've started an account called SEC Films, and we're doing YouTube documentaries about an hour, 15 minutes in length. We're going to interview some people. This is going to be about it's going to premiere 6 months from now when Will Wade re-enters the SEC somewhere. And we'll have some sort of title like The Cowboy Rides Again or something like that. And famed journalist Chris Lowe will be really mad at me for some reason. So that's part one. And part two, to save Tennessee, I had it in my brain and I lost it. So, whenever it comes back, I think it's going to be really good for everyone. And I just remembered it. It's putting Pat Adams in jail. I think that would be good for America. I think it would help relations. I think it would make this upcoming election less painful. People would vote for a candidate that jailed Pat Adams or put him in front of trial. He fails the don't know your referee's name test. That's the simplest test for sports. You don't need to know the referee's name. If you do, there's a problem.
Well, hold on. Ed Hockley, we knew his name because the man had some pythons.
Well, he was beefy.
Yeah,
That's
he was beefy. So that was a positive. We knew his name because the man was jacked.
But there's no super jacked basketball ref I'm aware of.
Yeah, there really isn't.
I think there used to be one and he retired. So,
who's the one who does the high knees? Do we know his name?
Jeff Anderson. I like Jeff Anderson fine. But that's the thing. The only thing I know about him is the high knees. I don't know how he is in a game. I've never had a reason to hate him in a game.
So if we know you because of physical abilities, traits, then you're probably pretty good. You're probably okay.
Yeah. TV Teddy, great. Very theatrical. Not a bad ref as far as I'm aware. Roger Ayers, only know him because he's always at the top of those Ken Pom ratings. Pat Adams, bad. I know who you are. I see your movements. You're like Anthony Jordan to me.
Would you rather, what's a worse scenario for Tennessee in the Final Four? Pat Adams calling a game for them or the Spalding ball in a Final Four? Which would you rather have?
Give me the Spalding ball, honestly. Because here's the thing. You get the Spalding ball. I don't know going into the game that it's going to be 2 hours and 45 minutes. Pat Adams on the call. I know I've got 7 video monitor reviews in my future. I've got 4 technicals. I've got 17 incomprehensible foul calls. I've got a miserable 2+ hours of my life. It's going to be longer than Godfather Part 2 with Pat Adams on the call in the Final Four. But thankfully, I don't think the NCAA hates Americans that much yet.
Yeah. Yet.
It's coming.
I love it. Well, Will, we have some college basketball we are going to get into on this edition of the program where, look, we talked about it a couple weeks ago about like where UConn was in terms of what they were a season ago. Now they're just like taking it personal. They're healthy. They got their big man back. They already had Newton, who was having a great year. They look like the best team in college basketball this year right now. To you, though, does it feel like UConn is breaking away from the pack with more schools around the top 5 and in the top 10 continuing the trend of falling short against some lesser competition of late?
So I don't think that they are breaking away from the pack. I think they are breaking away in a pack. And that pack being Houston, Purdue, and UConn. I think those 3 have kind of solidified themselves for now as like the clear best teams of college basketball this year because Houston's non-conference wasn't great, but neither was UConn's. They're both only got 2 losses in really tough conferences. Purdue survived against Northwestern after, nearly getting boo-booied out of the building. They've got 2 losses. You look at the Ken Pom top 25 right now. Those are the only 3 teams with 3 or fewer losses, let alone 2. Everyone else has 4+. And so you look at the resume, I think they're clear of the field. You look at the quality of play on the floor, I think those three are clear of the field. I think in games where Klingon is fully healthy and playing the whole way, UConn has at times looked like the very best team out there. They've got that extra gear that I'm not sure anybody, but maybe when Purdue is really cooking, can match. Like Purdue's shooting is on and Edie's, doing Edie things. But I still have some worries about them defensively. Not a ton, not as many, but they don't really force a ton of turnovers and they still foul a lot. But this is a UConn team that, really, they survived the run without Klingon just fine. Your only losses are both on the road. You haven't had a home or even neutral site loss yet. If they could play the NCAA tournament in the Northeast the entire time, I think they'd win all 6 games by 15 plus points. But I do think it's going to get a little tougher for them going forward. Like you still got to go at Creighton. You got to go you got to do both Marquette games actually. Close the season at Providence, and then there's leaving Big East play to go to the rest of the nation. But no, I think they're clearly in that top 3 group. It kind of changes for me night over night as to which I think is best. Like if you ask me right now, I'd probably put Purdue number 1. If you ask me if Houston beats Kansas on Saturday, I might have to put Houston number 1. But no, I think those are the 3 that are breaking away. You got them, and then you've probably got a pack of 14 teams after that, where you're like, on any given night, you could be the 4th best team. On any given night, you could be 54th. I really don't know. Like starting with Arizona and ending at Creighton, you could kind of consider all those teams roughly equal.
Who would be a worse national title matchup for UConn to repeat? Would they prefer to avoid Houston or Purdue?
That's a really good question. I think Houston might be a little tougher just because Houston is so uniquely nasty to prepare for on the turnover front. If your guards aren't ready for that challenge, you're going to be in hell for 40 minutes or until you figure it out. That being said, Houston obviously doesn't shoot very well. So I think both could have some unique ways of attacking. Purdue's shooting, Edie is obviously the headliner, but did you know that Purdue is shooting 40% from 3 this year?
I would assume that Purdue's always shooting 40% from 3, Will Warren.
But both, Braden Smith, 43%, Fletcher Lawyer, 43%. Lance Jones has jumped 7% in the last month. Mason Gillis, this is not going to hold, but Mason Gillis is at 51%. So
what did they shoot last year?
It was not 40, it was 32.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was why people kept sagging off on them in that 16-1 game. They just were like, we don't trust that you can beat us.
But you know what they can do? They can find themselves in games where they out free throw the opponent by 57 and then have the opponent coach cut basically a WWE style promo after the ejection.
Now, and that could be the case to me of I definitely think of the possible matchups remaining in college hoops this year. That would be the most interesting one, Purdue UConn, because it's, the 2 best bigs in America going at each other probably.
Yeah.
Certainly the 2 most motivated. I feel like if Dickinson had more motivation, you could put him number 2. But it just waxes and wanes so much game to game for him.
I'm so biased when it comes to Edie though. I don't like watching. I don't think
I don't like it either, and I feel bad because it's not his fault. He's 7'4", 300 pounds.
Yeah.
That's the way he's built. He's using, and he's not just big. He has legitimate skills. He's probably going to be a 1st-round draft pick at this point.
Do we think so?
I think so. Some team is going to figure out how to use that and how to hide him defensively, at least for stretches.
Yeah.
I think he'd be a good role player on a good team. He'll never be a starter, but he'd be a good bench piece.
But Garza was fun. Garza was fun to watch. Yeah.
I liked Dickinson at Michigan, and I still do at Kansas. It's just like I said, it kind of comes and goes motivation-wise for him. And even Klingon, I think, is more fun.
Yeah.
So it's a tough line to toe of you don't want to go with this comparison, but it does kind of feel like international hockey or soccer where there's a clear, Germany in the early 2010s, where it's you step on the court with them or at the field and they're just instantly better. And it's not enjoyable really for anybody because sure, it's cool when Purdue hits 3s. I can get behind that. Sure, it's cool when they block shots. But this particular style of Purdue ball is just It's the meme of like, this is brilliant, but I like this. This is brilliant, but I liked it more when Travion Williams was at center. Like,
Mm.
sue me, I just did. It was more up my personal alley of how I like to watch basketball.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Will, bubble bump. Which school is less on the bubble this week than they were a week ago?
I think we got a very obvious answer here. It's got to be South Carolina.
Mm.
They were 17-3 prior to beating Tennessee on Tuesday, and truly like the first truly bad shooting night Tennessee's had since Maui. So who knows if that's repeatable or not. But with South Carolina, they had the wins, and I think Lamont was upset about not being ranked, which is you can kind of give or take that in my opinion, but. The fact of the matter was they didn't really have the signature win. Like, yeah, beating Kentucky at home is good, but the metrics don't like this Kentucky as much as the voters like this Kentucky. Beating Mississippi State at home, good win, but you didn't prove it away from home yet. Like, their best non-home win was either Virginia Tech or Grand Canyon. So to get that big signature road win, to really prove your resume a bit further, like, you can make a real argument. They're probably like, what, 80% or greater to make the NCAA tournament, if not higher than that. I mean, I look at them and I'm like, yeah, that's going to be a pretty frisky 8-9 seed when it's all said and done. I wouldn't want to draw them. They play very hard, very well, just very well coached defensively on the whole, I think.
What's the biggest difference between them a year ago to now?
They got rid of G.G. Jackson. I think that is your easy call. No, it's that, and the spacing is a lot better. Like, yeah, they had some non-shooting fives they'd run out against Tennessee, but having BJ Mack on that roster is so huge. Like, there's not like, it's deceptive because of the way basketball is played now, but there really aren't that many ground and pound dudes that will pop out and take 5 threes a game. In the SEC, it's pretty much just him and Janai Broome, and Janai Broome is one of the very best players in America. So you don't really get the skill set very often, and I think he's opening up a lot more things for them. Like, you go look back at the box score, Tennessee held Michi Johnson down very well. I mean, he was held pointless until the final, I think, 12 minutes of that game. And, they had a couple role players go off, but the reason they won that was BJ Mack. BJ Mack kept finding his matchups, kept getting down low, kept getting fouled. That to me is the key for them going forward of if they're going to make a little March run or stay in this SEC title race, he's going to have to keep playing like that. And he's been stepping it up against top competition, which has been nice to see.
Is Lamont, like, do you think he's a rising star? Do you think he's at this job, like, he'll be someone who's targeted for a bigger one? Or do you think he should stay here for a little bit? Like, based on, because he was it was kind of like one of those where it's like, are you sure you want to leave chat now? Like, maybe get a little bit more experience for a couple more years, and he took this job because it's like South Carolina is not an easy job historically.
No. Well, that's why I would get out. I mean, it's not an easy job.
Look at Dennis Gates this year.
Yeah, you gotta. I think it's the same as Dusty for me a little bit at FAU. Of like, he's going to be fine this year. He'll get a job if he wants it. But in Pat Kelsey at Charleston too, you kind of have to strike when the iron is hot because you don't know how hot the iron is going to be in a year or two. And so, could it be that he makes South Carolina into like a yearly top 25 team? Sure. Like Lamont, I was a little surprised at how quickly national media gave up on him because it's the same pattern as it was at Chattanooga. It took him a year and a half to get things going there too. Like, his first year, they were god awful. They went 3-15 in the SoCon. They looked hopeless. Yeah. And then by midway through year 3, they were cooking. Like, they took off in year 3 and never really looked back. They were easily the best team his final year there. And it was like clear to me, like, oh, he's following that same plan here. I mean, I didn't think they would finish last this year. I definitely didn't expect this, but I thought they'd be more competitive. If you're a year ahead of schedule like this at a job that doesn't attract much NIL money or constant fan attention outside of when you are really good, you kind of got to jump. And it's not going to be pretty if he does, but like, I mean, so think about this. There's going to be a job or several that opens in the Midwest this year. Lamont is from Findlay, Ohio, played at Worcester, coached his first 20 years of college basketball in the Midwest somewhere. Is that your next Ohio State coach, for example? is that I mean, like, it'd be wild, but could that be your next DePaul coach or something like that?
Stay away. No, if it's
Yeah,
between
don't go
South
there.
Carolina. Yeah, although
But
we
you're
will
gonna
talk
have
about
a
them in
lot
a
of
second.
you're gonna have a lot of jobs like that open in the Midwest of, like, could Lamont potentially I'm just, like, spitballing here, like, it would be wild if he did this, but, like, if Clemson opened, Clemson has
Mm,
more resources. Like,
yeah.
sorry, they do. Like, would you take that? Or if Otzelberger left Iowa State, would you go to Iowa State? He's gonna have options, I think, and it's gonna depend. Like everything in this coaching search cycle upcoming, it's gonna depend on what Louisville does because
Mm.
they are the hammer that sets all the dominoes in motion. But once those dominoes are set, we're gonna get a really clear picture of A, will he leave? And B, is it worth it to leave?
Maybe another one, dark horse, like stick around, just Texas. Maybe you have that one
Yeah,
circled.
he'd be a little fish out of water there, I think, because that is now technically gonna be leaving one SEC job for another.
Yeah.
But like I'm scanning the program ratings list here on KenPom, just thinking of some options here. Like West Virginia is going to be open. Lamont's not a bad option there. What if Penny leaves Memphis because they're not doing so hot right now?
Look, everyone has their issues with the Rice basketball owls. Will Warren, who amongst us has not taken the
Some of us
Rice
have
owls?
lost. I've lost to food in my life a few
Hmm.
times. I haven't lost to rice specifically, but I've had some bad experiences with food before. I sympathize
Hmm.
with the Memphis Tigers
Mm.
and that one account on Twitter who is like really obnoxious about them.
I feel like you're responsible for this because we lead a show 2 weeks ago about Memphis and how legit this is, and then they proceed to
Now,
go on a losing streak. A
Now,
really
please
really rough one.
recall that I
Mm,
pointed out on that show they were playing with their food a lot
hmm.
and that they needed to shape up or ship out on that front to really become contenders. I was optimistic on the whole, but I did point out they've been doing a little too much. They had a little too much dip on the chip. They've been humbled, and now we got to see where they go from there.
Absolutely. Well, this is something that I've just been thinking about, like, because DePaul is open, right? And you're seeing a
Mhm.
lot of names about DePaul. It's something that we'll always see the end of time is who can save DePaul. Like it's it's just who can save DePaul. No one will ever understand why DePaul can't figure it out. It's in a great market for college basketball. There's a lot of talent in the state, in the city. Like DePaul should not be this bad all the time. And yet, here we are. DePaul always trying to find the right guy. Will Warren is the ultimate just college basketball story. Will Wade trying to fix DePaul. And should that happen, because it's a must-see event of like, can Will Wade, who's just, it doesn't matter if he's at McNeese State or wherever, he's going to win a lot of basketball games.
Mhm.
What happens when he meets the immovable object in DePaul basketball? Like, would that be what finally turns the corner for the Blue Demons, sir? What say you?
Now, I think it'd be a very interesting hire. I think he would be the fit that makes the most recruiting sense. I it's but the thing with like hiring Will Wade is you as the AD have to be comfortable with how much am I willing to live in the gray area of
Mhm.
recruiting and NIL and portal work. Because Will Wade, honestly, more than any other high major coach of my lifetime, maybe since like I guess Kelvin might count, but like 15 plus years is the point, is comfortable operating in that gray area. Like that is his life's blood. He will push every single rule he knows to the limit to get what he wants. And does it work? Obviously.
Mm.
But I think if you hire Will Wade, and we saw this at VCU, we saw this at UTC, LSU, we're about to see it at McNeese, you have to be comfortable knowing that like Will Wade is not going to be at your school for longer than 5 years. I don't think there's a single job in college hoops that he would last 5+ years at. It's kind of like the Lane thing of like Lane is great for a time and
Mhm.
place to get you going again, and you kind of wonder how long is that time and place? How long is this guy going to stick around? There are long term builders in college basketball, and there's short term builders. Will Wade is an elite short term builder. And it took him a little bit to get it going at LSU, but like once he did, they looked awesome. So I'd be curious to see like how long would he stay and how quickly would that turn around. I don't feel like it would result in a tournament bid in year one, but year two, year three, he'd have him back rolling again. But when I think of like his options, I just cannot imagine him taking that.
I don't know. Nothing would surprise me with Will Wade. Like what job he takes, or I like. Is there really a job that would surprise you that he jumped at? That might
No,
open up
but
realistically.
DePaul's the one that would surprise me just because he's never coached in the Midwest. Like,
Yeah.
so he's from Nashville, went to Clemson. The closest he's been geographically is Harvard.
Hmm.
So, I mean, like, kind of, but not really. I mean, Harvard and the Midwest are not culturally similar at all.
Yeah.
Um, there's no like real evidence he could recruit Chicago the way he needs to, or the way he's recruited Atlanta, for example.
But if you're
But
DePaul, you just take the shot, man. And if you're worried about him not
yes,
being there in 5 years, man, hey, maybe you get 4 years of good basketball. Like that's just a rare, like take it for where you're at, man.
well, I get it, but it's just when I think of Will Wade's potential fits, that one
Mm.
doesn't make much sense to me. So it's like the ones where I look at, I'm like, yeah, that lines up with what I would picture. You know, like if I think this is going to happen regardless where it's for Chris Beard leaving Ole Miss because
Hmm.
it's been reported like his assistants are renting. They have not bought houses in Oxford. None of them have.
Hmm.
So I think that's probably a one and done mercenary thing, especially if he makes the tournament. Will
But then
Wade
who
could go to
jumps
Ole
at
Miss,
Beard?
huh?
Who jumps at Beard? Where does he think he's going? What's the
He could go
big
to
jump?
Louisville. That could be your next Louisville head coach.
Mm.
I know it's nasty to think about, but it's plausible. I mean, people love winning, and that's what is valued above all. Or if like Porter Moser finally decides he's had enough at Oklahoma, that could be your next Oklahoma coach, which is still an SEC job. Same for Will Wade. I think
Yeah.
he's just going to have a lot better options than DePaul. I mean, like, honestly, even Vanderbilt is a much better option to me, where you're back
Vanderbilt
in the
and the
SEC. It's a
Nashville
prestigious
connection.
job.
I
Yeah,
do not
from
want Will
Nashville.
Wade at Vanderbilt. That
Oh,
is,
no, I don't either.
I do not want Will Wade at Vanderbilt. No, thank you. Hard
Yeah.
pass on that front. Um, what makes New Mexico, for the folks who are going to see New Mexico in the tournament, ostensibly here, if they keep taking care of business over the next month here, Will Warren, top 25 team, tough loss earlier this week. They were upset a little bit, but what makes the Lobos a top 25 hoops team this year?
So for people who didn't get to watch them last year, they had these two mid-range mercenaries that I
Mm,
adored, still do. Uh, Jamal Mashburn and Jalen House. Both have actually been injured for significant parts of the season. Mashburn's missed 7 games, House has missed 5. So they've kind of had patchwork lineups. Like they have a Texas A&M Corpus Christi transfer who's been in and out. Jamarl Baker has been missing some games. Quentin Webb, a freshman who's been really good, has missed some games. They have not really been fully healthy at all this year, and yet they're 18-4,
mm,
top 20 in KenPom. The reason why I think they are such a threat this year compared to last, they nailed, like capital N nailed their portal additions and their recruiting work. Nelly Jr. Joseph was on Iona's roster last year, played quite well in the round of 64 against UConn, held up fairly decently. He's been their center this year, really high block rate, terrific at avoiding fouls and getting to the foul line himself. Their defense year over year, last year 120th, this year 27th, forcing way more turnovers, protecting the boards a lot better. Rim protection is way up. I mean, I think I would argue that, this conference standings might not bear this out, but I do think that they're the best team in the Mountain West out of
hmm.
a really freaking good conference, that is. I mean, that's a conference that's at minimum probably going to get 5 teams in the field. And they're just like, they're very tight. They know what they want to do. They're straight. They're like, it's a weird deal of they play super fast, but they don't really attack the rim all that much. They are just
Mm.
extremely good in the mid range. Which makes them like uniquely hard to guard for 2024 because every team wants to give those shots up because you're like in your head, everybody's more analytically focused now, correctly so, I would say. In your head, you're like, okay, mid range jumper, that's fine. I'm willing to give that up over a 3 or a layup. But New
Mm.
Mexico hits those so well, it's bad. Like you don't want it's antithetical to what you want to do. You would much rather give up a 3. You don't want to allow them to the 15-foot range. And they're a uniquely tough team to prep for in that regard. Plays very fast. And I got to say, for somebody who's really down on his Minnesota work, Rick Jr. is pretty darn good. This is a really well-assembled roster. He's recruiting well. They've got their own unique, identifiable style. I look forward to where they go from here. Like, I don't know how it works in March, and it certainly sucks that their three best players are all going to graduate this year. But they've got like a good base there to build off of going forward. And Pitino has nailed the portal move so far. So, yeah, I mean, if you haven't had a chance to watch this team, I'm going to be honest, this week probably isn't the best because they play at Wyoming and home against UNLV. But pencil in these two dates on your calendar. February 13th, day before Valentine's Day. Also the day before Ash Wednesday, I found out.
Okay.
Playing at Nevada. Very tough place to play. But the real winner here, the Mountain West game of the year, in my opinion, Friday, February 16th, New Mexico at San Diego State. That is a banger. Standalone game that night on Fox Sports 1, by the way.
Okay. I like it. Do you think Pitino's maybe that's where USC should go? Who sit at 8-12 right now. Pitino might not be a bad USC fit.
Pitino wouldn't be a bad USC fit. There's been like a funny bit on Twitter of like people wanting to run the Pitino era back at Louisville with Rick Jr., which I think it will never happen, but it would be very funny. But the interesting thing with him, he's got the Southwest experience, but a vast majority of it's in the Southeast and Northeast. You start thinking about jobs that may or may not open there, and I can't immediately think of one that would be super attractive to him. But at the same time,
I can see West Virginia for him.
West Virginia is a possibility. Ohio State is a possibility.
Yeah.
I could see that happening. He's a great motivator, smart guy. It's not going to be DePaul. I know that much.
No.
He's above the DePaul range. But like Boston person, Providence alum, a lot of Northeast experience, Louisville, obviously. He'll bounce somewhere. But if I were him, and I know this is not how coaches think, but if I'm him, stick around at New Mexico. That's a historically very good basketball school.
Yeah.
I mean, do they have a ton of deep tournament runs? No, but like in my lifetime, I'm just looking here in Wikipedia, they've made the NCAA tournament 11 times. That's great for a school in a non-Big Six league. That's real history. You have an awesome arena that gets filled pretty well, has its own weird name, the Pit. I mean, I would stay there as long as they'll have you, or until like a UCLA level job were to open up.
And who knows on that front?
Who knows?
Bad news or good news, Will? Is Duke back officially?
It's always bad news. It's always bad news. So the funny thing, because I saw this in our little outline, and I wanted to get this exact number for you. Can you tell me, without looking, where you think Duke would have been on January 1st in KenPom?
Ooh, on January 1st?
Yeah, New Year's Day. As a hint, they exited November 11th.
I'm going to say 41st.
They were 9th on New Year's Day.
Oh.
Would you like to guess where they are right now?
3rd.
12th. They're all the way back, baby. They've dropped.
So explain it to why are they dropping and yet people are buying back in?
One, this is going to shock people. They're Duke. It's a brand. People are looking for any excuse to buy back in. I sat through the COVID year. I remember seeing that ESPN breaking news thing of like, Duke can still participate in the NCAA tournament if they want to, despite having COVID. It's like, no, they're not getting selected. Shut up and go away. No, the reason why people are buying back in is because they're 11-1 in their last 12. It's as simple as that. Who have they beaten in the last 12? Great question. But they're 11-1 the last 12. They did beat Baylor on a neutral court right before Christmas. They did, I'll charitably say, escape Clemson at home with the help of a call that I was not very much a fan of.
Clemson fans were not happy after that game.
I don't think they should have been. That was, I did not see that call as very good. But they did hang on to beat Virginia Tech quite well on Monday. I will note they shot 53% from 3 in that game, which kind of up to you on if that's repeatable or not. But I think people are buying back in because they've had some health concerns throughout the year. They kind of seem to be building back to it. Like Mark Mitchell is getting back to it. Flip has looked really good. Jeremy Roach has accepted his bench role and is playing pretty well. They look fine. My fear with them is it remains the same as it was 2 months ago, is that this roster is too thin. So you got the 5 starters right now, or we'll call them the 5 starters because they get the most minutes. That's what I count. Flip, Roach, McCain, Foster, Proctor. You got Mark Mitchell getting about 24 minutes a game. You got Ryan Young getting about 12. That is the full list of players getting 8 minutes a game. 7. If they have one injury the rest of the way, their calculus gets shifted in a very negative way to me, because they're going to, I mean, like, you can make it happen, but you got to get real lucky to get through March with a 6-man rotation and not have like serious foul trouble affect you, or an injury again, or some sort of malady take you down. UNC did it once with Hubert. They made it through March with a 6-man rotation, and they had guys puking on the floor in the national title game. I mean, it's possible, but I need to see somebody else on Duke step up, or I need to see a second star emerge alongside Flip to really, truly believe in these guys, because the Proctor bump has not happened. Roach has been fine, but Roach is not like a number 2 option. McCain has been fine. McCain has not really played like a number 2 option. The number 2 option has largely been Mark Mitchell, and I don't know that it serves you very well if your 2 best offensive players are front court guys. You got to get something from your backcourt going forward.
I wonder though, is it sometimes where like the injuries and everything else where you're like, it's not going to be your year, but the preseason hype, I don't know. Like Duke, does it just feel to you like the omen is just they'll be okay? Like, I mean, are they better than they were a year ago? Like, I mean, Tennessee obviously took them to the woodshed in the tournament, but like, are they a better team than what we saw at their peak last year?
I don't think they're better than their peak. They could be by the end of the year, but like right now, I would take last year's March Duke over this year's February Duke by a hair. And I think it comes down to like the offense this year is better, but last year's defense was just balling out by the end. I mean, you saw them against Oral Roberts.
Yeah.
Max Asmus got put in a locker for 40 minutes, and that is hard to do. I mean, you saw that in the ACC tournament. It's not hard to shove Virginia in a locker, but you get the point. You know, much better defense last year, did a lot better job at forcing tough 2s. And while they've held up quite well on the boards this year, I just haven't been as impressed with them on that end. I think they're skating by a bit on what, yet again, is a pretty crappy ACC that's got, 2 obvious great teams in it, and then what I would politely call an ocean of mid. So, like, here's a fun thought experiment for you. Who is the 3rd best team in the ACC? Because obviously UNC and Duke are 1-2.
I feel like it's Clemson when you tell them they're not. When Clemson,
that's a great point.
Like if you tell Clemson they're the 3rd best, then you know they're about to lose some ball games. But if like they think they're the 7th or 8th, then it's Clemson to me.
Okay, I can hear that out. I think I would probably pick Clemson.
Yeah,
but then I also think like maybe it's Wake Forest, maybe it's Virginia. The point being, like,
yeah,
you really only in like.
I'm sorry you didn't say NC State there anywhere.
I don't really believe in them, man. To be honest, they're 14-7. They're fine, but like, I don't know. Them losing the way they did to Syracuse puts a negative taste in my mouth. They really don't have any great wins. Like, you go to Ken Palm right now, they have 1 win over a top 50 team, and that was Wake at home. And I think that was the double bird game, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
That was funny.
That was awesome. I hated that he apologized. He should have owned it. It was cool as hell. If that's the rule, is like, if it's cool, you should own it. But either way, I don't think it's a Gonzaga situation with the ACC at all. I mean, this is like the depth here is remarkable. Like you only have the 2 top 15 teams, but 12 of the 15 are in the top 100. Like, there's no real off nights unless you have Louisville on the other end of the line. But the point being, they're not getting the night in, night out experience against the best of the best the way like Tennessee is, or Houston is, or Kansas is, or like UConn even. I mean, Creighton would probably be they would be easily the third best team in the ACC. So would Marquette. So would St. John's. So would Xavier. So would Villanova. I don't know that would be a real argument. Like, even in the Big Ten, like Purdue's got to play Wisconsin. They got to play Illinois, MSU, Northwestern. That doesn't really exist for Duke. So it's a question of like, I understand why people are buying in. I'm not stupid. It's Duke. But I also kind of caution against it because they've dropped in the metrics over the last month because they're winning games, but they're not impressive wins. Like the Pitt home loss was bad. I thought that was a nasty one to take. Really didn't play well at Louisville. You pulled away late. Needed a call to get past Clemson. Struggled with an awful Notre Dame team on the road for about 38 minutes. They have like a good win or two in there, like littered throughout. But like right now, strength of schedule 79th on KenPom for the whole season. 79th. UCF is 83rd to give you some context here. FAU is 80th.
Well, we have to talk about this real quick here. The Vols went down at home. They now are down to 4 games they can drop before they're in danger territory of teams that can win the title with double-digit losses heading into the tournament. It's not a lot. There's a reason for that. When you lose double-digit games before you get in the tournament, that means you have some flaws. That means you weren't one of the nation's best to that point. So the odds of you winning pretty slim. So if you go back to the history of like 10 losses, man, there's just not a lot of teams that win it all with 10 losses. And now Tennessee right there at 15-5. They get Kentucky at 15-5 this weekend at Rupp at night. Should be rocking. Should be a fun environment. But what did you see? Is there a reason for panic based on the South Carolina loss this week? Because I thought, like I was saying to somebody's where I'm like, I don't think they lose a home game this year. Like that was something I just kind of said. I'm like, they're just different at home. I think their defense is always gonna be up. Like I didn't see a home loss coming. Then they drop it at home. Like what's real and what's not when it comes to Tennessee right now?
So I would caution. So I will say I saw one writer call this the worst loss of the Rick Barnes era, and I was like, I've been around for a lot worse.
That's friend of the pod, Ryan Chempert, though.
I love Ryan to death, but I remember losing by double digits at home to UTC. That was a lot worse than this.
Yeah.
Or losing like some of those COVID era games, like losing to 8 and 9 Kentucky or whatever it was.
Maybe it's like the worst loss of like the
it could be
expectations Barnes era. Does that make sense? Like the expectation era.
But even then, last year's Colorado loss was a lot worse, I thought.
But it was early.
That was early, but that was functionally a home game against what ended up being a very bad Colorado team. Anyway, though, I would say there's a couple of things here that wouldn't happen again. One, Talon Cooper and Miles Studi are not going to shoot 7 for 8 combined from 3 again, probably in any game. And 2, it's probably also unlikely that Tennessee is going to have such a catastrophic night from 2, 3, and free throws again. I mean, I'm not doing a bit here. Like you go look at their shooting records this year, and this really is the first truly poor performance they've had from the field since Maui. Like you can point to Tarleton State. I would point to Tennessee being interested in that game for as long as they had to be to get across the finish line, because that's the pre-Christmas game. Everybody wants to go home. That's not really a data point to me. This is the first one since Maui where you can point at it and say, oh, Tennessee shot like garbage. The difference between this year and last year to me is I felt like we said that every 3 games last year of like, oh, this is Tennessee's worst shooting performance since last Tuesday. Whereas this year it's shocking because it hadn't happened in so long. Like you hadn't had a 5 for 21 night from 3 in like 2.5 months. You hadn't melted down like that on free throws in a long while. You hadn't struggled to get offensive boards like that. I mean, I don't know if people are aware, like they got held to their lowest offensive rebound percentage since the Kansas game by a South Carolina team that's not really elite at defensive rebounding. So I would be more worried if it didn't feel like such a, Murphy's Law game for them where you have that happen. You have the free throws driven and out. You have Estrella miss a wide open dunk that clangs out of the rim. you have the very first play of the game where Jonas Adu gets it wide open off the pick and roll and whiffs on the layup, like doesn't even hit the rim. I would be more worried if I had not seen this team do what they did to Alabama, Florida, Illinois, Wisconsin, etc., and B, if this had been a trend, because like this truly was like an out of nowhere offensive performance for them. So I'm not as fretful about that. I will say South Carolina did the right thing in this game. They took more threes than twos. They only shot 33% from two, by the way. But the key to beating Tennessee, unless you have like a Kentucky level talent or something, is you've got to up the variance and take a ton of threes because Tennessee will give up a lot of jumpers. It's how the system works. And if you hit those backside passes and get open, like you're going to have a chance. But you got to knock them down. They had two guys who went 7 of 8. Good for them. So it's not like a catastrophic loss to me. It felt annoying, very annoying at the time, I will say, especially because I went. But I think it.
No more games for you the rest of the season, Will. You've
Can
lost your
I tell you
privileges.
the last 2 January games I've been to?
What?
This one and last year's home loss on Chris Lofton retirement night.
Oh, you're definitely banned. Why aren't you saying this out loud? I'm putting this on Twitter. Will Warren, if you see this man, please escort him kindly out.
I'm allowing myself to go to like home Vanderbilt. I think
no, you're banned. Will, I'm sorry. You can come next year. Like it's gonna be like we're losing a lot. Like next year, you're allowed back next year.
Wait until I get the press pass for the NCAA tournament. Then it really will be bad. But that could be the cure because I don't do press usually.
Well, that might be a different omen.
I think that I would also be more worried if Kentucky didn't just do the exact same thing the next night. Because
which makes this game on Saturday that much more intense because someone's going to be riding a 2-game losing streak and a lot of panic from that fan base, depending on how Saturday night goes.
Yeah, and Kentucky's got a little bit different of an excuse of I believe they were missing 2 players, right? They were missing DJ Wagner didn't play, and I don't think Justin Edwards did either. But that's still a really friggin' talented team. And you told me every UK fan on Twitter told me Big Z or whoever was going to be Jokic Jr. And guess what? He sucks. So no, he doesn't suck. He's a freshman who hasn't really learned the game yet. But point being, it's been proven Kentucky can lose at home. They keep doing it over and over under Cal, to be honest. So I'm less fretful about this game than most. I think the key really is 2 ways. One, does Kentucky have a single player that can guard Dalton Connect? Because I don't really see one on the roster. 2, is there going to be a single Tennessee player that can keep Antonio Reeves from going from 30 for 30?
Well, we know the answer to that.
I think there is.
It's Meshack.
It's Meshack. But then if he doesn't go for 30, what do you do with Reed Shepherd? What do you do with Rob Dillingham? They're a really hard team to guard, but they don't do any guarding of their own. So I think whatever happens, the most likely outcome is a really exciting start to finish game. Lots of points both ways. And you take a look at Tennessee's game, and if you adopt the attitude of, well, that was their worst shooting performance in 2 months, that's probably not going to repeat itself, then you're probably like, okay, I think they're going to have a good shot against Kentucky. And if you're a Kentucky fan, you can probably say the same thing of like, oh, Florida shot 12 of 28 from 3. That was one of their best performances of the season. As long as Tennessee doesn't shoot 50% from 3, we're probably going to hang in there. So, but I do think it's going to come down to, and this is kind of every Tennessee game now in a way, can anybody stop Connect? Because
probably
if
not.
You can't, then, I mean, it's wild to say this, but he is the first Tennessee player in my lifetime where you have the potential of that Jody Meeks game, where he hits 54 in an opposing arena.
I think it's just gonna be fun. Like this is just gonna be such a fun atmosphere, and I think both we agree 2 elite teams. They're somewhere in the top 3 in the SEC right now, depending on who you ask. But the Reeves versus Connect factor alone of who's more deserving of National Player of the Year love, like that will obviously be a big part of this. And then 2, I think, and I don't know if you agree with this, I think it's fair for Barnes to explore Meshack starting at the 4 in this game and Josiah coming off the bench. I think we're at that point now where I think it's just.
I'm
have
good
to.
with starting Meshack. Yeah,
I think you have to. I think you have to try this now. I think we're at that point.
It's going to be a big game for him either way. I would be surprised if he doesn't get like 20 minutes here.
And I think that should be the case going forward, right? Like Meshack should be a 20-minute player for this team.
Yeah, I'd be up for it. I think you got to reduce Josiah's minutes until he figures out whatever's going wrong with him offensively.
Which we hope turns around, but until then, I think Meshack, especially with this matchup, I think it needs to be this needs to be a big Meshack game. Where my head is at. Final thing here. Bart Torvik / Kim Pom don't lie. West Virginia is the worst team in the Big 12 this year, Will Warren.
Yeah, I don't feel like that's any surprise. I mean, it's kind of, I can't, well, I guess it's an easy target, right? Like they're bad. They have a reason to be bad. Everyone understands their reason to be bad. But at the same time, like you being the worst team in the Big 12 still means you'd probably like mid-pack in a lot of conferences. And the good news there, you being mid-pack in a lot of conferences means like you're still hanging around in Big 12. Like you beat Kansas, you beat Texas. You've pulled off some pretty good wins so far this season. And, I don't anticipate them doing much more of that, but I think the obvious thing here is we're going to have to see what they do come March, because I don't think Eilert's going to keep the job as interim. You can't really, what are they? I mean, you just kind of assume that they're very bad. But yeah, 8-13, he's not keeping the job. So then it becomes, where do they go from there? Do they get Jared Calhoun from Youngstown State? Do they try and see what Pat Kelsey's number is? Stuff like that. I'm very curious to see what their eventual pivot is, because obviously this isn't it.
It's also just sad, because obviously the circumstances here were complicated with Huggins and everything else, and that was not the plan to have to do a quick coaching change and figure stuff out here in Morgantown. But it just feels like when you stay like the loyal route, where it's like we want to go with someone in house, like, and the players were all, and you have their response after of like the players want to keep and stay in house, stay in the family, promote from within. You're just like, we all in the back of our minds are like, I get, you have to, like Rodney Terry, you kind of have to with the run there. Like those feel good stories. It seems like more often than not they don't work out when they get the full-time thing, and you have to rip the Band-Aid off more often than not.
Yeah. And like that, I'm sure Eilert will land on his feet somewhere. He might even stay at West Virginia as an assistant. Like he didn't ask for this.
That'd be weird though, if he stayed on as an assistant after this. I think that'd be real strange. But that's gonna be a battle, I think, at Tennessee years from now. Do we go with a Barnes lieutenant, or a Barnes guy, or do you just Danny White be like, nope, we're gonna go a different way. We're gonna go with a certain Florida Atlantic coach potentially. Who knows?
We're gonna play a Providence coach too, but
yeah, we'll see. Will, do you have a stats for us this week? Your
boy,
stats?
do I have a timely one.
Okay.
Obviously, I guess it'll be 2 nights ago when this is released. The Purdue Northwestern game finishes up. Purdue 46 free throw attempts, Northwestern 8. Do you know the last time a Big Ten conference game featured one team shooting 40 plus free throw attempts while the other shot 10 or fewer?
I do not.
It was Northwestern who shot 40 against Illinois just last January.
Oh,
which
wow.
makes Chris Collins' post-game conference, where he said, I've never seen a box score like this, that much richer.
I love that. I didn't know that. That's fantastic. But I understand. Like, there's just some you're just like, this is wild.
If I was a Northwestern TV or a Northwestern fan, I don't think I'd have a TV this morning.
Also, as someone who has played Purdue this year, it's not fun. It's not a pleasant experience. I didn't enjoy it earlier. Will Warren, what can the good folks check out from you over at statsbywill.substack.com today?
Good stuff coming this weekend. So we got our weekend watch list as usual. If you sign up today, paid subscription, you're going to get a preview of what I think is the best game of the weekend, Kentucky, Tennessee. Not really sure what would be close. I guess Houston, Kansas. I don't think Duke, Tennessee would beat it, to be honest, unless we're at Duke. But great game that you'll get a preview of. And then I think by the time this will be up, we'll have up the comparison of this year's top 50 teams to the last 25 years at this date of the season in KenPom, which is a way, like last year we did this. I think you remember the series. We went through and we pointed out, hey, 2023's group is really bad at the top, but has a pretty stout back end. Guess what happened in March? Wildest Final Four grouping I've ever seen. Is it going to be the same this year? Probably not, but it still looks like we're going to have some chaos. So we'll have that up at the blog. I'm going to get back in this dang Vanderbilt series, especially now that I found out it made its way to a Vandy message board. So they had nice things to say, by the way. I wasn't expecting it.
Okay.
They were like, yeah, we agree. We suck. And I was like, yeah, you do.
I think
not
they're just,
trying to
they
be mean.
wanna, yeah. Hey, like it is what it is. There's no running. And it's also like, we need to accept this so that we can adjust and move forward.
Yeah, exactly. So got that. And then other series coming out. Hopefully some work with some other people in the sport. Our boy Trilly Donovan could be seeing some stuff from him out there soon. So, lots to come. But, again, I'd like to say this every time I'm on here. Always thankful for the support people give. Reached another new high in subscribers this week, which is cool. Another new high in reads or read count or whatever. I don't look at the stats very often. But, no, always thankful to be here. Thankful that people read and thankful that people care. Makes me feel good about what I do.
I love it. Go support Will and all the great college basketball work he's doing at the best college basketball website today, statsbywill.substack.com. Type in your email, become a subscriber. That easy, that simple. Do it today. Will, always a pleasure, my friend, and I will talk to you next week.
Thanks for having me on.